Hey, how's it going? My name's Slade Hart, founder of Slade's Guitar School, and we teach guitarists how to play guitar by ear. I want to talk today about a question I get quite a bit, and the question is, which things are the most important things to practice? So I'm going to take a step back here. I'm not just going to talk about guitar, but talk about music in general. In my opinion, there are three things that we really need to practice consistently, probably on an everyday basis, if we're going to continually get better and better as musicians and do so in a really effective and quick, fun, exciting way. The first thing that we need to practice is just the general art of listening. Listening is the core key component of music. It's the most important thing that has anything to do with music and our enjoyment of music, and so we really need to be listening a lot to a lot of different kinds of music, especially the music we love, because we're going to want to listen to that anyway. And also learning to kind of branch out and take in new styles, and even really practicing listening to the world around you is something that's really good. If you have I live downtown in downtown Austin, for example, so I always have car horns and sirens, and so if I'm home and there's a car alarm that goes off, or someone's beeping for someone to move out of the way in traffic, I like to go to my instrument and try to figure out what notes are being played, either by the car horn or by the siren or whatever it is that's making noise down below. So listening is very important. It's fundamental. Without listening, you can't really have music or an enjoyment of music, let's say. And the thing about listening too is that it's more than just putting on your headphones and zoning out. I mean, there's active listening and passive listening, and with active listening, what we want to do is get into the habit of, let's say, clearing our minds and just taking the music in and letting the music take us wherever the music is going to take us. This has happened to me. I know it's happened to you. It's happened to everyone that's ever listened to music. We put something on, either in the car radio or at home on the stereo, and then we kind of zone out and we go to another world. We start thinking about the groceries, we start thinking about chores that we have to do, business, things we need to take care of, and our mind kind of wanders away from the music, and we don't really take a whole lot of the music in, at least not actively and consciously. So active listening to me is the ability to really clear your head and focus solely on the music. So you don't have an internal dialogue, you're not making pictures. Instead, what you're doing is focusing on the music and just letting it saturate your brain, saturate your ears, and really, getting into it in the most complete way you really can get into music. So listening, gotta listen as much as you can, and really practice clearing your mind and focusing just on the music that's being played and enjoying it for what it is. The next thing I think is extremely important to practice is ear training. And ear training is a lot like listening, but not quite the same. With ear training, what we're doing is we're deliberately teaching our ears to recognize patterns in music. So we have basic melodic patterns, basic harmonic patterns, and we want our ears to be able to recognize those either in our everyday lives or when our song comes on the radio, or when we're learning a new song, that kind of a thing. So we have intervals. You want to be able to recognize intervals, perfect fourths, perfect fifths, octaves, thirds, sixths, seconds, sevenths, and then compound intervals. And so you get to the point where you can hear any interval and recognize it and know exactly what it is. And that's a really important stage to reach on your musical journey. So we want to train our ears to recognize chord patterns, chord progressions, the intervals that make up chords, and the intervals that make up harmonies and melodies that we listen to all the time in music. So ear training is very important, and it's deliberately teaching your ear, training your ear to recognize patterns in music in a very similar way to in which you would learn a language or something. You want to learn vocabulary, basic syntax, that kind of a thing. With music, you want to learn the musical vocabulary, and those are the notes, the chords, and the harmonies and melodies that make up music, the music that we hear. So training your ear is deliberately getting your ear to learn and recognize patterns in music, and consequently being able to use those patterns for your own creativity or just to enhance your enjoyment of music. But it's a little different than general listening, and they should be treated as separate skills. Another thing I think is extremely important, and probably it may be the most important part of music, is rhythm and your ability to recognize a pulse in music, to keep up with that pulse, to recognize where the beat is falling in the music, and to be able to predict that, and also to be as precise as possible. So, if you put on a song, whatever song you like to listen to, a good way to start out is just to tap your foot along to the beat, and see how precise you can get with that. Rhythm, again, is the glue that kind of brings music together and makes it really, really interesting. And I tell you, it's something that's completely overlooked by a lot of people, and it's really quite simple. What you got to do is just break it down to its most, elementary parts. So you essentially have a pulse. So if you had a metronome, you turn the metronome on, let's say to 60 beats per minute, and you listen to that click, and you can practice just clapping right on top of that click till you don't even hear the click anymore. It's just the click and your clap make one homogeneous sound. And then you can practice counting out beats. So you could take something like 3/4 time and go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and start clapping on different beats. So we go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And you can take that and you can make it as complex as possible. You can subdivide the beat. You can do all sorts of things with rhythm. It's a lot of fun, and it's essential that you practice it, even if it's just for 1 or 2 minutes a day, just to keep yourself familiar with it and keep your ears open and your body open to being receptive to rhythm. So listening, general listening, active listening, both are very important because that's why we like music in the first place. Ear training, the ability to start recognizing the intervals, chord patterns at a very basic level, and then you can move go as advanced as you'd like to go. And then rhythm, being able to recognize a pulse and beat patterns and being able to keep up with those and be very precise. On top of that, what else could you practice? You could practice technique. Technique is something, again, that's important. I don't think it's as important as the things I just mentioned, but it is something that can be very useful, especially if you're playing something that requires a little bit of virtuosity, technical virtuosity. So, spend a couple minutes a day when you have time working on technique. You're going to have to learn how to play the instrument correctly. So you have to have a teacher, show you how to hold the instrument, how, since we're playing guitar, how to strike the strings, how to hold down the strings behind the fret, that kind of a thing. There's some basic things you have to master. But then as you get better and better, technique can take on all different forms. There are a lot of different ways to play any given instrument. I say a lot. There are at least, 3 or 4 different ways that you can hold the guitar and that you can strike the notes and have it still come out sounding okay. And I'll talk about some of those ways in a later video. So we look at technique. That's something that's really important. But again, I think that rhythm, ear training, and listening are the most important things you could do to stay musical, to keep making improvements in music. And if you're looking for something to practice every day, it would be those 3 things. And even if you could devote 15 to 20 minutes to each per day, you're really going to make some really, really good improvements over time. So that's my opinion. I'd be interested to know what you think. And if you have anything you'd like to add to the list, feel free to go ahead and do it. There's another thing. I remember there's a famous quote I want to leave you with. I was reading it was an interview with James Hetfield, who's the lead singer and the rhythm guitarist for the band Metallica. I'm sure you guys have heard of them. And one guy, I don't know when, this is whether on a live stream online or people were calling in and asking him questions, or the interviewer had some questions prepared for him from some of his fans. But the question was this: the guy or girl goes, what do I have to do to sound like you as a guitarist? So what do I have to practice? What do I have to learn how to do in order to be like you? And his response was, well, don't practice, because what he does essentially is he just sits down with his instrument and he fiddles with it until he finds something that he really likes, that he thinks sounds cool, and then he can turn that into a song or present it to the band, and they go through their whole creative process. So there are some people that don't even practice at all that still play really, really well. And if you're the type of person that doesn't really want to practice, you just want to enjoy the instrument and see what you can do with it, and make cool sounds, cool noises, come up with cool progressions on your own, that's really cool, and you should feel completely free to do that. However, there is a limit to how far that can actually take you, and there's a reason. In Metallica, for example, Kirk Hammett is the lead guitarist and James is the rhythm guitarist. To take nothing away from James, because he's an excellent, excellent guitar player, an excellent songwriter too. So there's a lot to music. There's no right answer. There's no way to say, follow this exact formula and you're guaranteed to be a virtuoso. But if you were to ask me, I think ear training, I think rhythm, and I think listening are the three most important parts of music and musical training. And I'd love to hear what you have to think. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Thank you very much for watching. And again, I'm Slade Hart with Slade's Guitar School. And if you'd like to learn to play guitar by ear, go check out our site. Thanks a lot.